before I became a Christian, I had studied 17 religions and philosophies. And I was born into a family where my mother had been, she was Afrikaans, and she had been raised as somebody who was Ingia. And so she had a certain degree of godliness and a knowledge and a fear and really a reverence for God. But it was there as a foundation, but it really wasn't something that she walked or lived out in a large degree. However, when she did try to sit in seances, my father got her into one of the seances where he and I used to sit because I was training as a medium as well. All of us in the family had psychic abilities. But I had this thing about being a medium. There was a psychic gifting on me to become a medium. And when my mother sat in a seance, the spirits in the seance that spoke through our mouths told her to get out because she was evil. Now with hindsight, knowing that was an evil spirit speaking, if an evil spirit says to somebody, "You're evil, get out," you need to know that just that presence of God that was in her, even though it was in a greatly diminished form, you understand how demons flee from the presence of Christ and from the name of Christ, which is one of the reasons that I really encourage people not to be afraid of the demonic. Not to be afraid of it at all, because we are supposed to be the ones that bring terror to the demonic kingdom, not the other way around. And so, that was who she was. My father had strong psychic giftings. And so that was the family that I was born into. However, I subsequently discovered that in my bloodline, on one side of my father's family, one side was strongly occultic, but the other side it just had vicars or clerics in it, pastors, ministers of different churches, and a very, very godly bloodline. And I thank God so much for those who were in my family, the forebears, that I know are going to be in heaven when I get there. And you're going to find that there are godly forebears in your line as well. And just think of meeting them. And when they're in heaven and you meet them, you're going to meet them in a young form. But they will be people who have prayed for you, because they would have prayed for righteous seed, for their children and grandchildren and their descendants to know the Lord Jesus Christ. And so these are exciting things to look at. But I sadly, although I'd had an experience of Jesus, I think I've mentioned it to you, when I had this experience of Jesus when I was about 3 or 4 years old, where I'd had a vision of him. And that had really been something that was so powerful that I remembered it for a while, but then nobody ever spoke about it again, and I forgot it. And it just came through when I was in the process of being delivered. And so I am grateful for the fact that I'm able to use the knowledge that I acquired before I was saved, the things that I hate now with a deep passion. But I can see how God has taken the thing that was meant for evil in order to bring good, because I've been able to teach on this and bring freedom to people because I was in it. And so it was a dreadful background to have. But now I don't mind that at all. If I had to do it again, my choice would be to get saved when I was 2 and stay saved my whole life. But it didn't happen for me that way. But I'm able at least to bring understanding. And so what I'm going to be doing in these 2 lectures is not sticking to the notes, because I'm never going to get through it. So I'm just going to touch on some of these, but really I'm going to teach you and ask you to not even try and follow along in your notes, but go through them afterwards and fill in the blanks. So what I really want to start with, if you'll look in your manuals at page 24, we are going to start by looking at something here, and that is the introduction to the occultic route. And I've said here, God told the Israelites to destroy every living soul in the land of Canaan, including children. This severe judgment indicates the severity of the curse brought on the land through the occult. The people were worshippers of idols and practiced magical arts. Death was the only way to remove the influence and presence of the occult. The occultic root extended to the third and fourth generations. And I know that people don't like to talk about this thing. Like, how could God possibly do that? And the thing is that there is nothing God does that is wrong. Absolutely nothing. He is only good. He is perfect in all his ways. And I want you to think for a moment about the children living in the land and the ones that the Israelites had been told to kill. And I don't know what your view is of where children go when they die. My own particular belief is that before the age of accountability, and in the Jewish faith, when the boys get bar mitzvahed, is it 12 or 13? I can't remember. 13, thank you. And the girls are bat mitzvahed at 12. Or is it the other way around? Excuse me. This is not tiredness. It's thirstiness. Anyhow, when Jesus was at the age of 12 and his parents found him in the temple discussing things with the teachers of the law and those who were leaders in Israel, he said to them, "Why were you worried about me? Didn't you know that I had to be in my father's house?" And at that age, when a boy in Israel, right up to this current time, once a boy has been bar mitzvahed, he is considered a son of the covenant, which means that he knows what the covenant that God made with the Jewish people is, and it's his responsibility to live according to the covenant. And that is so different from our particular mindset about teenagers, because we tend to think, as Westerners and people who are not Jewish, we tend to think of teenagers as of necessity having to go through a rebellious phase. That's not the way God made us. And the Jewish people are really the only ones who actually show God's intent and purpose for young people. And that was why God said to Abraham back in Genesis 12 and going through 12, 13, 14, 15, and so on. As you look at that, he said that he'd chosen Abraham because he knew that he could trust Abraham to teach the ways of God to his children. And he said that he also gave the children of Israel instructions to write scripture across the doorposts of their houses and to bind them on their foreheads. And right now, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, whom I greatly admire and I donate towards kitting them out in warm clothes in winter and in replacing helmets and boots and things like that. But in the IDF, I was reading just today about how I don't know if you know that the Jewish people bind the scriptures onto their arms. They call them tefillin, and they bind them on their arms with black ribbons, kind of black cords. And they were just giving numbers of how many thousands had been issued and how many, I think it's something like 5,000 more are needed. And they were encouraging people in Israel to sow toward that, because not all of them had it. We have a lot of secular Jews in Israel. And so it's only through this war that they have come to see the miracles of God and understand and just become closer to God. And therefore they want to pray and they want to be obedient to the covenant that their forefathers made with God. And so this is the way in which God turns evil into good. But in speaking about this, it's to bring us to the point where we realize that when we expect so little from our young people, that we allow them to just investigate anything and everything that could be extremely damaging to them. And it's that thing. Well, my mother was different. She said, "Don't talk to me about teenagers. They weren't invented when I was young." But the thing is, they've been invented now. And so people kind of think, oh, well, this is my rite of passage. When I'm a teenager, I can rebel. Not if you're a Jewish teenager. not if you've been brought up in the ways of Judaism and you've been brought up in a way that where there's a deep desire within you to serve God, to worship him. And so this is one of the big differences. You also find that the Jewish people have always educated their own children. They are the ones, they would not allow Egypt to educate their children. When they lived in Egypt during the 430 years that they were there, first there was favor on them. After that, they became slaves. But while they were there is no way on the planet that they would have allowed their children to be educated by the Egyptians. They educated them themselves so that they could teach them right from wrong. And right up to this current year, you'll find that there are Jewish schools wherever there are Jewish people living. And quite often people who aren't even Jewish send their children to these Jewish schools because they know that they're going to receive such a really edifying education. And anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked completely into Israel, but that is the basis. We can see a distinct comparison. So now, if you look at these children of the Canaanites, I believe that before the age of accountability, if a child dies, it's not going to heaven because it's innocent, because we are all born with a sin principle within us, the sin that came down into the human race, and it's like an inherited sickness. That is what the sin nature in us is. It's something that came to us through Adam when he sinned, because he sinned knowingly and willfully. And so the sin nature and death, physical death, passed into the human race. So even when a baby is born, it's not born innocent, because it's born with a sin nature. However, God in his mercy passes over that. If you don't know and you don't understand and you're just a little child, the mercy of God, I believe, will allow that child to go to heaven. So it was an act of mercy of God's to say, kill these children, because in that way they wouldn't go on and perpetuate the wickedness of their fathers and their forefathers. It would be as if they had got some disease like diabetes. And yet, instead of letting them carry it through to the nth degree to die in agony, in mercy, they would be able to be delivered out of that kind of suffering. And so we can't think of God, although he is a judge, we can't think of him as being unmerciful, because he is not. He is merciful, but he's also righteous. And because he's righteous, it means that he will always bring judgment where it's due. So I hope that settles something in you to start with. And then I also just want to explain something else about who we are in God. All human beings that have ever been born on this planet. God created man in his own image. And of course, the first person created was Adam, and then Eve was taken from part of his side, and she was created after him. But together, the two of them were given dominion over everything in this earth, but they were not given dominion over one another. But they were given dominion, equal dominion, which is the power to rule over everything. And in the new earth, there are going to be men and women who are given the responsibility of ruling and reigning with Jesus. It says that those who've been faithful with little will be entrusted with much. And the Bible actually says that the little is money. So if you think that some people are given billions, billions of whatever the currency is, and God looks to see how they steward that. And of course, they're not going to steward it properly unless they know him. But when we are faithful with money and we don't cheat on our income tax, we don't do anything that is slightly irregular, but we are absolutely scrupulous, as if somebody was watching every move we made. And I said as if, because God actually is. There might not be another human being around us, but there is definitely God himself watching every move we make. Just as Jesus sat at the treasury watching the people putting their offerings in, and then he saw the widow put in 2 tiny coins, and he said, she's given more than all the rest because she put in everything she had to live in, and she gave out of her need, whereas the others gave out of abundance. And